Yo, welcome to Happy Hour Holidays, your go-to podcast for business, life stories, and entrepreneurship. We cheers to motherfuckers that got the guts to go out there and do something. I'm your host every single week, Manny Fresh. We got the resume, Sean Fabre, and we got Mr. Steve Fantetti.
Allegedly.
With Athlete Empowerment Agency for all athletes, any high school, college, NFL, he's got them all. If you need help, he's your fucking man. And then we can't forget
Fantetti Legal.
So, Steve, we are deep diving into.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking
the
about
JFK
We're talking about the
files.
JFK files,
Let's
man.
do it.
And how the CIA and Lyndon B. Johnson decided to collectively assassinate
Oh my God. The narrative is set.
assassinate JFK through the direction of Israeli operatives in the Mossad.
Oh my God, you're way off.
And
All
not
right, keep
only
going.
that, but within the JFK files, they
Yeah.
also tried to poison the sugarcane in Cuba to overthrow Castro
Oh, yeah.
as well
That
to
was-
incite a revolution. There's a lot to cover here.
One of several things.
I'm not sure if Manny has read any of the JFK files.
ChatGPT is going to tell me everything I need.
What do you think he just used to give us that spiel?
No, bro.
How did
I
he
researched that
memorize
shit.
that
He,
shit?
he took a right turn to Mossad out of
Wait, hold on, which
nowhere.
was my
No,
camera?
bro.
There is documents about the Israelis. I mean,
Yes,
I've only read
there we
several
go.
thousand
Are we
so
are we
far.
covering that you have a
Oh,
a
do
book
we?
coming out?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
should
do?
we even say that?
Yeah, because I didn't know at first.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. The book is done. It is being edited, and then it's going to publish.
And what is the book about?
The book is about.
If you want to say.
Yeah, I'll give brief.
And you
brief
wrote it
synopsis.
on the grassy knoll.
I wrote part of it
And
while
then
I was
and
on
then it disappeared.
For real, I had to. For real, and I survived. I was just there in January to finish it up.
What happened to everything you wrote on the grassy knoll?
It was not saved properly. Sean couldn't recover it, by the way.
I tried everything.
No one could have recovered it.
Yeah,
but it was great because I got to write again from scratch. With having the base was still saved, but the enhancements, I call them, to the story that I wrote when I was in Dallas in January were really good. But
36
they were
hours,
gone.
man.
Yep, 36 hours of writing down the drain. But I started again, and that's why it's done later. But it's
And
done
now
on
it's
time.
better.
My goal was to be done by this time in March, so it all worked out. So it's being edited, and then it's good. It's about
It's not good, it's better.
I agree.
There you go.
It's that's for the people to decide who read it when it gets out. But no, it's about these two college kids that
Oh, you want to talk about your book?
yeah, let's just say that they end
Okay.
up. I won't get into all the details, but they, actually, I'll do it this way.
How about a synopsis?
I'll keep it very brief.
With
So
a cliffhanger?
let's just say that I've seen a lot of images, pictures, photos, videos that looks like people got another view than just the Zapruder film, right? You guys know who Abraham Zapruder was?
yeah,
You got the main film that showed
Of course.
Kennedy's, the shots. So I feel like someone else got another vantage point and it was never shown to the public. And if it was able to be found that someone had that video, what would happen to them? And would that video see the light of day? And if that video did see the light of day and expose the whole thing, how it really went down, what would happen to our republic? Could the public handle it? Would it cause more distrust of the government? Because the distrust of the government right now is actually at an all-time high than it's ever been in the history of the United States.
According
So-
to who?
According to everybody who in any poll has asked that question, you can look it up right
I
now.
don't know. It's like the
100%.
most transparent it's ever been.
No, I think it's just starting to get that way. Even though I think the document release doesn't really give you everything. It's not as transparent as they're making it seem. But
Like the Epstein list, you know.
That's one that I'm pissed
that's
off.
my point. Is all this stuff
that
getting
was- and it
released and
wasn't-
like we're not really
They're not going to do
anywhere.
it. You know what? Because it's going to end up
No.
killing a whole bunch of people. People
Well,
are going to die.
There's
because,
transparency coming forward at least, which is nice that Trump is releasing them. But the question that I care about is, are we going to get the answers that we want to solve these mysteries? And I don't think we're ever going to do it. My book just gets into a part where if this information did get out, what would happen? How do the American people take it? And would it get us to the point where we can move on from this? The point that I like about Trump
I mean, we're
releasing,
talking about he was assassinated in the 60s, right?
correct, 1963.
Yeah.
And so
And we still haven't moved on.
well, that's my point. And so to be an open, free society and to get the level of trust in the government back from the American people where it should be, do we need to cleanse, and I think Trump might be thinking that way, cleanse these items out here that are, rooted in secrecy, let the American people know what really happened, and then can they now move on and we can start functioning in a way where those things are things of the past and we don't let that happen anymore and we won't let it happen and we're a better society because of it? Or is it going to be the inverse?
Total collapse.
And I talk about these things in my book, and I think it's going to be a good book for people who want to read. And of course, when the JFK assassination is involved, it's great. And it's cool because there's a part in the book I don't mind talking about where these guys have a vantage point. They create a certain kind of camera that didn't exist back then in that time, and they're able to capture. I basically say the way I think it would have went down with more than one shooter.
You don't want
It's
to give
neat.
away too much.
No, that's
though.
enough.
No,
That's
but
it.
you know what I like, Steve, is that
Mhm.
well, also just when they released the files,
I
and
know.
you're about to release your
I
book.
know.
It couldn't be a better
could
timing
not be.
to be an all-time bestseller in a Netflix movie,
Yeah.
Mr. Steve Fantetti.
New York Times. Let's go.
And now we're gonna move the resume to Sean to Steve Fantetti.
Off of LinkedIn, back to Indeed.
Damn it.
So I guess
you know, you mentioned the multiple shooter standpoint that
Yes.
you have in your book, and within the files, they claim that there's between 6 to 9 shooters, but
So
not
where
all of
did
them
you-
took a shot.
So okay, I'm glad you said this. Even though we're
Yeah.
getting way ahead, this is actually not bad. So where did you think? Because this is what I want you to answer for me. Because I've reviewed a lot of documents in this thing. I haven't reviewed all 80,000 yet, and I think it'll take a year or more. Because you have to do that like spaghetti plot thing where it's like you got that red string, you have that board up, and you're
Yeah.
connecting things. You can't do that in 24 hours. Like
No.
I read probably
AI
6,000 documents so far on my own. A lot of them aren't even legible. They were typed, by typewriter in the 1950s and,
then
60s and
scanned
scanned multiple times. And so a lot of them aren't even legible. But my whole point is, I don't think you're going to see, and I can't make an absolute from this because I haven't read everything. I know there's also documents that they won't disclose or ones that have been destroyed. So we're
Or
not really
redacted.
getting everything.
or redacted.
Redacted.
Which they said it wasn't going
Is-
to be redacted.
There is no document that's a smoking gun that says, oh yeah, we hired Jeff Smith and Steve Fantetti to stand on the knoll that day and fire this rifle.
There is.
So yeah, exactly. And that's my point. So I don't know what you saw about 6 to 9
but there are documents where it alleges that
Allegedly.
there was a person, I forget the guy's name, within the CIA that went to a friend's house and said, "Hey, listen, I fear for my life because
You're talking about the Underhill memo.
okay,
Yeah,
is that what it is?
That's his name.
And then
correct.
he died literally 2 days later.
He thought that he said he literally
There's been a lot of players within the CIA. That's just one of the.
he used to work in the CIA, and he said, I think there's actors within the CIA that had something to do with this. And
Well,
within
he
6
didn't
months,
say I think. He says I know.
So allegedly.
Allegedly.
And so
I differ.
anyway, he ends up dead less than 6 months later. He's found in his apartment with a gunshot over his right ear.
And it's called suicide.
And it's called a suicide. And guess what? When they find his body, guess what the gun is in? His right hand, but he's left-handed. So why would that happen? It clearly shows it was probably they didn't pay attention to the fact that he was left-handed. And if he's a left-handed guy, he wouldn't have went like this to kill himself. He probably would have went this way. And everything they know about him, people who knew him, the way he had like a baseball glove in his apartment, it was all like he's left-handed. Why the heck would he have a gun in his right hand? So they probably just planted it there and left whoever it was that allegedly killed
Did
him.
you ever watch that?
So that's what I'm saying. That Underhill memo is key.
Did you ever watch that movie Shooter with Mark Wahlberg?
Love that movie. What a great movie.
Okay, so do you remember when Michael Pena is being set up
Yes.
and they put him in the contraption and they got his service pistol and they have it all set up to about and then Mark
Shows
Wahlberg
he fired.
sticks-
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's sniping from a distance in that
So
barn. Yeah.
do you think that contraption's actually real and maybe they use it? Maybe they use it on him.
That guy back then, the contraption did not exist back then.
Come on, bro. It's not really that hard to make that contraption.
First of
it's
all-
pretty easy.
I don't know. I don't even know if that's true. I'm not an engineer, but I will tell you this: in the 1960s,
That was.
they're gonna have to ship that thing to this guy's apartment, put it in his apartment, set it up, get him hanging there, then do it, then bring the contraption out with no one seeing you. That doesn't sound realistic.
The CIA can make it disappear.
I feel
Let's
like
think about it.
You read the
Back
wrong
in the
ChatGPT
60s,
page,
back
bro.
in the 60s, back in the 60s,
Yeah.
there weren't a lot of cameras. There
No,
wasn't
there's
CCTV.
no camera phones. You're not wrong. That's a good point.
So what makes you think that couldn't happen? And then any witness was coerced into not testifying or not
killed.
even giving
Or
killed.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
It just sounds
So
to me,
how-
they could walk in his apartment and kill him and be like, "Oh, we just saved a whole bunch of steps and issues and being seen with this big contraption that did not
It's
exist
not
in
a
the
big
1960s."
contraption. It was literally just something that
No,
goes
he
to
was
his
hanging.
arm.
His whole body.
No,
was
they
hanging.
were hanging Michael Pena.
Yeah,
That's not what I'm talking
But the thing
about.
that had the little black
on
thing
the
that
arm,
cocked
it
his arm
literally
back.
just went around his
Yeah.
arm, and that's it.
It's possible.
It was literally this big.
You're raising good doubt that I think is not true. But again, I have no basis to say you're wrong. So, and knowing the CIA, they could have something like that.
Which
How-
they probably did.
Steve, well, how was JFK's political influence in the 1960s?
I mean, it was very strong.
He wanted government transparency too.
He was the youngest president at the time ever elected.
He fucked Marilyn Monroe.
He probably did allegedly.
Allegedly. I defer.
Even though you can't defame the dead, so technically you can say whatever you want. That's the rule in the law. You can't be liable.
That's good.
But that's good. That's good. He's like, he's avoided a lot of jail time. No, but
so Michael Jackson did.
So
rape
he
all
was
those
loved
kids.
because he was younger. He was able to connect with the youth more. He created the Peace Corps. People wanted to get involved and,
Really? He created the Peace Corps?
help America be seen on the globe as doing positive influences and work across the globe. Married Jackie Kennedy, who's even younger than he was. I think she was 8 years younger than him.
She had a donk on her, too.
And I don't know. Is that allegedly? I don't know how you know that. But ChatGPT.
He told me that she had a donk on her. Okay, yeah. No, bro, I research history as well.
That's got to be a part of history I did not research yet. Yeah. But anyway, we're getting off topic. But so his influence was great because for a Democrat to win after having several Republican
who were the prior
president? Well, I mean, Eisenhower was in presidents. 8 years before him. He had 2 terms, World War II general. Yes, and then Roosevelt was in before him.
Are you telling me a Republican won World War II?
No, I would say a country won World War II, but that's a different.
Well, I'm stating a fact here.
That's not a fact. There's more than one person that was involved in the war. You said a Republican. You said.
Yeah. Well, he was the president of the United States when they won World War II.
Yeah, Eisenhower was a general. Roosevelt was the president. And then Truman actually was president at the end when Roosevelt died in office.
Oh, and then Truman dropped the 2 bombs.
As long as a Canadian's teaching your history.
What was Truman?
Was a president.
No, what?
Harry Truman? Oh, what party was he? I think he was a Democrat as well.
So Democrats decided to drop nuclear bombs?
And Roosevelt was also... I mean, technically, it was the American.
Now all of a sudden,
American government.
Now all of a sudden,
no, I'm not saying you're wrong.
What the fuck's going on?
He had his rationale for doing what he did, but we're getting off topic again.
Yeah, gaslighter.
The important thing about Kennedy is, at the time, he was very worried, and he said it. He had a famous speech at American University in Washington D.C. for a graduation speech in 1963. In June that same year, he died, and he said that he did not want America hegemony to be the way that America should rule, which means that he didn't want like a Pax Americana where like America's enforcing their ideals and,
almost like imperialism.
Removing governments exactly across the world. We're not forcing Americanism on people. That we should be free in a free living society and be able to make our own, judgments democratically on how we want to live. And so part of what he hated was secrecy. In that speech, he also talked about the fact that, and I think the CIA had a lot to do with it. I'll get into that in a second. Is he felt that because we were fighting all these covert wars, it was making America look bad overseas.
Like proxy wars.
And it was going to lead to a World War III. And he, being in World War II and almost dying and seeing his friends die, and his PT-109 boat got crushed by a Japanese cruiser. You don't know the story about this?
No, I don't.
So he ends up going in the war, even though he's too sick.
World War II.
Yeah. Because he was too sick. He was like an officer working in an office for a while, and finally he wanted to fight. And I think they faked his medical. He had a bunch of medical problems. You can research this. Public knowledge. Back then, no one knew. He had like Addison's disease. He had a whole bunch of problems.
I'll tell you, one of them was an ED.
Maybe. Allegedly. So, by the pool. So at the time, he ends up being able to get into the army, and he's has a bunch of people with him in this boat. It's called a PT-109 cruiser boat. It's more of like a quick speed boat that can shoot guns quickly as you're going by coastal areas. So one night, they're on patrol and it's dark, and this Japanese destroyer comes out of nowhere and splits their boat in half. Several men
run straight through
it. Several men on board die. He survives. A couple other men survive with him. Apparently, this is the story. 2 or 3 of them couldn't swim. He put 2 or 3 men on his back, not at the same time, would go back, and brought them to the closest shore, swam. So he's like a war hero and like won a medal for this by saving these guys'
Medal
lives.
of Honor?
I don't know what it was.
Valor
could have been,
whatever.
Like Forrest Gump.
Could have been like a Silver Star. I don't know.
No, but he had 3 men on his back. Usually,
not at the same time. Not at the same time. But it's interesting because they end up surviving. They end up meeting somebody who can't speak English. They write on this coconut their longitude and latitude, and he says that it's him. And he kept the coconut in his Oval Office. He got it framed and put in like a glass case. So he grabbed a coconut shell and wrote that down and told this guy to bring it. It was some random villager who like has never seen probably Americans in his life, and took that coconut and brought it to the closest place, and they were able to radio in, and they came and saved him. So that made him like a big war hero.
Off the coast
of Japan.
Of Japan?
Yep.
So Japanese local helped Americans.
Well, I mean, it was an island person who hadn't like no, they don't have any technology. It was like they
Yeah,
were just
they
living
don't-
on islands.
they
They had
probably
like
didn't
just
even
like
know war
they're
was
wearing
going
like
on.
trees and stuff on their body. Like no, they had like no real clothing. So it was an island individual, and so. But he saw how bad war was and people died. And he didn't want U.S. to get into other wars. And so to get to the crux of answering Manny's question is he knew that he didn't want U.S. to get thrown into another war. So he was purposely trying to avoid going to war with Cuba, going to war with Russia, because he knew that would be next. And so he tried to do everything he could to avoid it. Meanwhile, in the background, there's actors, deep
Within the
state,
CIA.
otherwise, allegedly CIA, even in his own
It's in the
administration.
documents, bro. It's not allegedly.
Well, we can talk
CIA.
about that next time. But to wrap this point up, because it's important to have this background, is he had those forces behind the scenes working against him, and obviously, if he's the president, he should be setting the agenda for the country. But yet, there's these actors behind the scenes that are stopping him from doing that, and they're doing things like the Bay of Pigs invasion, and like there's things that people, and you'll read them in these documents if you look at them. But it's also part of history. But like the CIA, in my opinion, was created after World War II, not just to be a spy agency to gain intelligence. It was run by Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles. They were guys that were in World War II. Allen Dulles was head of the OSS, which is what the CIA kind of was before the CIA was created by Truman in 1947. And John Foster Dulles, his brother, was Secretary of State for 8 years under Dwight Eisenhower. They were lawyers from one of the biggest law firms in the world called Sullivan Cromwell. They represent a lot of corporate interests across the world. Well, it's believed that those guys were making decisions in the government to help their corporate clients at these law firms because they were removing Mossadegh in Guatemala in Iran and Arbenz in Guatemala.
Contra wars.
They were some of that in you see
Nicaragua.
there's documents. Well, that was more under Reagan, but there was South American influence. There was also the individual, I can't remember his name, from Africa that was killed under Eisenhower as
What
well.
was the country?
Kenya, I believe.
Kenya.
I'll get his name during the break. But anyway, so they were removing, my point is they were removing leaders across the world. This is in the late 1950s and going into the 60s.
Well, they were removing communist and socialist leaders, right?
It was anything. It didn't matter. Point is, they were removing these leaders because there was business they wanted to do in these countries they couldn't do. They wanted to control oil in Iran. They wanted to control, like United Fruit Company was a big company of Sullivan Cromwell's clients. They wanted to control like bananas and oranges and all these different things, different businesses, oil coming out of South America. So they couldn't get, these rulers were suppressing American control in these countries. And they said the only way we're going to do this is to remove these leaders, kill them, and basically create elections where our guy that we appoint gets elected. And they were doing this.
American puppets.
The CIA was doing this. So it looks like the CIA was helping business interests, not helping America. Point is Kennedy catches on to this and says, I want to destroy the CIA and shatter it to the wind in 1,000 pieces because it's becoming where we've almost, like Eisenhower, you could argue, basically, delegated U.S. foreign policy to the CIA instead of keeping it in the presidency. And all these things are going on how? In secrecy, because the CIA is a secret organization. So you have to have accountability. You don't know what's going on. The president can say that. And these things are going on, but they're creating conflicts that will, in the next presidency, create strife, which we saw with Cuba. Eisenhower approved the Bay of Pigs plan to go and kill Castro in Cuba because of the communists being so close to U.S. soil and having a relationship with Russia. We saw that as a threat if nuclear arms or other missiles were close to the Florida coast. So they didn't want that relationship to be strong. They had to get him out. Also, there was Mafia influence. The Mafia wanted and had casinos in Cuba. Mm-hmm. And the prior leader before Castro, Batista, thank you, he allowed U.S. and foreign interests in there to make money. He was getting huge kickbacks. Problem is, Castro comes in and says, none of this money is making it back to the people of Cuba. There's only a select few that are really benefiting from all of this.
Please don't tell me Castro was a good president.
Castro said, you guys are out, and I'm going to take this over. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying This is what started it. That made Americans in the Mafia very angry that they couldn't launder their money through casinos in Cuba. They couldn't run and have different business interests to create more money that they couldn't do in the States because the laws were more lax. They're off the coast. They can't go to jail subject to the same laws. This was perfect for the Mafia because they're going to get in trouble all the time.
That was kind of like how Vegas started. Vegas started kind of in Cuba with the shows and all that.
That's exactly what it was.
And The Godfather talks about this in part of The Godfather. They make inferences to kind of the same issue. And so, point is, when that got out, the U.S. government had no choice but to say, we got to do something. they actually worked with the mafia. And I can talk about this after the break if you want me to go in detail about it. But essentially, Castro had to be removed. Eisenhower approved the plan. Kennedy said, well, I don't want to go in and do this because if it's us and it goes wrong, we're now going to activate Russia and we're going to be into a potential
Which
thermonuclear
did
war.
occur because
The
since
13
Castro,
days crisis had happened.
because
remember?
Castro is communist and Soviet Union was communist socialist.
Yeah.
And
Marxist Leninist too. And they
Yeah.
had
and they decided to start, and then there was a
the 13-day
blockade.
issue in October, you got 1962, which thank God Kennedy held his mind and was able to fight through it because all his generals were telling him to go ahead, let's just attack these guys. But the point is, the Bay of Pigs happened, and Kennedy didn't give air support like he was supposed to, so everyone was stuck on the beach, and basically the CIA helped train these Cuban exiles to fight back against Castro, and they obviously lost.
And they're called Gusanos, actually.
Well, Operation Mongoose, which is funny.
No, I'm saying the Cubans were called Gusanos.
Yeah, I'm just telling you, but Operation Mongoose was a CIA operation to train these anti-Castro Cubans to fight against them.
Yeah.
And so when they lost, it looked like Kennedy as being weak. A lot of the generals and people that were involved. Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA, was fired after that.
He prevented World War III. I don't see how anybody could think Kennedy was weak.
But these people wanted to continue to be imperial, to protect their outside interests that weren't American interests, and they didn't want the CIA to be disbanded. And the mafia also said, we want to be able to do these businesses. But guess what else happened? Kennedy and his brother, Bobby Kennedy, who he made attorney general, were prosecuting the mob. People don't know about this story either, but Kennedy barely won the election in 1960. He beat out Richard Nixon. JFK. Okay. So JFK wins barely. Allegedly, the mafia, his dad made a deal with the mafia to get him elected by creating false votes in Illinois to win the state.
When we get back from break, we'll continue this great story. And then we'll also talk about how the media coverage shaped up the assassination in the 1960s compared to what the media coverage of today shaped it up to be. We'll be right back with Happy Hour Holidays. Thank you for tuning in. All right, guys, and we're back with Happy Hour Holidays, and we're in a very, very heated discussion.
Well, they're not going to hear what
off
we just talked
camera
about.
that nobody heard except for me, and you guys will never hear it.
I don't know. I kind of want to behind
It's a
the
secret
scenes.
like the CIA.
Yeah, well,
we're not transparent.
We argue about proxy wars there. Happy? That was the argument.
Yeah.
Next, move on.
So, Steve, you were telling us a little bit about the CLIA, Central Lack of Talent. From
They
Meet the
have a lot of
Fuckers.
No, I was just wrapping up the point about JFK. I'm glad you said that because you asked me about how he was viewed politically and letting you know that he wanted to have a more open society, end the secrecy. He wanted to end these, foreign policy actions that weren't approved by the president. He didn't like that were happening that he claimed the CIA was doing. And the straw that broke the camel's back was, in fact, the Bay of Pigs invasion. And he realized that I've got to take control. And so he wrote an action memo, 272, that said by Christmas of 1963, he wanted to withdraw like 50% of the troops from Vietnam. He wanted to get out of that war. Didn't want to do Vietnam.
Oh, shit.
Then he wrote another memo. Arthur Schlesinger wrote one, and it's in the documents, by the way, the document leak, that said, yes, we will take steps.
Not document leak, release.
Sure. That's a very good point. It's not leaked.
I wanted to.
It was an
clarify
authorized executive order authorizing it.
That's not a leak.
So it's not a leak.
Yeah.
Although arguably.
God, he's a lawyer over here.
So anyway, to wrap that point up is Schlesinger's memo said, yes, we can take control of the CIA and not make it a paramilitary type operation anymore where it's in secret. It's going to be run now with the authority of the president under its umbrella, under executive authority. That way we know what's going on. They can't take actions without me approving it because they were doing all these things behind, like no one was basically watching over them. There was no oversight committees, nothing like that back then. And so to stop that, that's what he wanted to do. And I think when he did those two things, either disband the CIA, withdraw from Vietnam, and then maybe the third one is to take the CIA under the US's or under the executive's control. That pissed a lot of people off in Washington. That said, we got to get rid of this guy.
Why would that piss a lot of people off in Washington?
Because think about what I just told you. The Dulles brothers were helping corporate interests out. It was helping America get into different countries and extract resources and create contracts where America businesses could thrive in places in the world we were never thriving before.
So it kind of sounds like all these corporations were actually running the CIA as opposed to...
Well, that's an argument. We don't know if that's true. That's allegedly.
Isn't that what you just explained?
I said that's my argument. I didn't say I have proof that that's true.
Oh.
I said you could probably infer it. And when you look at the documents, a lot of them, you can make that same inference. Now, from there, you could also claim that that's a problem to why they wanted to get rid of Kennedy. Plus, they wanted Vietnam to go. there's companies, I talk about this in my book too, but I won't name them on here right now, but you know, there's companies were making jets and helicopters.
Probably like Lockheed Martin.
And
right?
their contracts were down after World War II and the Korean War was kind of settled. And they're like, yo, we need to make some money. So let's get into the Vietnam War. And all of a sudden, the jets, fighter jet and helicopter contracts from the U.S. government skyrocketed. Well, people who were involved in that they want to make money. They need war. So maybe get somebody in office who would make sure the Vietnam War happens, which the day after LBJ gets in office, guess what he does? He signs a memo saying, yep, we're going to go full speed into the Vietnam War.
Wasn't that
when Kennedy said, we're not going in Action 272 memo?
Wasn't that under the guise of we need to eliminate communism in Vietnam?
Well, of course you have to have that. Well, the Gulf of Tonkin incident was made up, right? Remember that? Where they said that a boat full of U.S. servicemen was blown up by the Viet Cong, and therefore that gave us the right to go into Vietnam. We found out that didn't even happen. So
what actually did happen?
That didn't happen.
So it was just a
like
completely fabricated
That's
story.
what they correct.
Who published it?
I don't know. I have to look it up. I wasn't
The
alive.
New York Times? Or?
I don't know. We'd definitely look it up.
Post?
I'm sure everybody did.
Yeah.
But
so you can't trust media.
Well, I don't know about that either. But I do know this.
You literally just said it.
No, you can't compare then to now. But
yeah, you actually can.
I'm
If
sure
media has been
technology
lying-
is different. The access is different. The rights to travel and get information is different. But again, the methods may not be that dissimilar.
No, they're not.
No, I know you want to challenge the status quo, so I like that.
I
Now,
do.
point is after that part, you have that conflicting interest now as motivation because you're asking, well, why would they want to get Kennedy out? You need to know these answers. That's why we're covering this background. The last part is, well, the Mafia, they had their interests, right, to get rid of Kennedy because if he was not going to go into Cuba to forcibly remove Castro and he was against American interest there, they're like, well, we have nothing that we can do to help us because I was trying to talk about this earlier. When President Kennedy appointed his brother Bobby Kennedy as Attorney General, well, guess what happened? He was prosecuting mob figures. The alleged deal that JFK's dad, who was a big-time oil baron back in the day and used to be in a lot of different corrupt businesses, including prohibition. He made some deals with the mafia to run liquor and stuff like that during that time to make money. He made a lot of money. And so
I didn't know that.
He promised Sam Giancana and a bunch of other mobsters that if you let my son win Illinois, it's gonna come down, get the votes out there, etc. Then I'll make sure Bobby Kennedy, my son, he said at the time, is not going to. He'll take it easy on you guys.
Wait, how would the mafia ensure an election victory in Illinois?
Through what I said.
Ballot stuffing?
False ballot stuffing, they actually looked it up. People who were dead voted in that election.
Kind of like
it was found out later.
2020.
I knew you were going to say that, so I don't want to go there. So anyway, point is
There's already evidence.
They cut a deal. Well, the prosecutions didn't stop. The McClellan hearings in the late 50s were heavy. Bobby and JFK were both in those. They were prosecuting mobsters. The prosecutions never stopped. Bobby Kennedy, deported one of the most famous mobsters at the time. I don't know if it was Sam Giancana or another one.
Scarface.
Yeah, they were. But
not a real person.
He deported them out of the country, and so they were pissed about that. Guess what else? People don't know. In World War II, the U.S. Army worked with the Mafia. They used the Mafia to get into Sicily, into Italy. Say, find us the right passages. Where are the Nazi strongholds at? Find us a way for Americans to get in. They helped. They gave them intelligence. Absolutely. Lucky Luciano was the one that was in charge of heading that. And he was in, what's it called in San Francisco? They shut the jail down. Alcatraz.
Alcatraz.
Let me out, and I'll give you all the information, have my guys work for you. They said, well, we can't let you out in America. And they apparently let him back out in Italy at the time.
How the hell did the Mafia
Now,
have that
they were
much
working
power?
together. Oh, they had a lot of power. And
How,
so
though? I mean,
that was the deal is we've worked with you before. We'll work with you again. So the Mafia is mad at JFK. You've got these outside deep state actors, people in the CIA. They're all mad at what he's doing. The motivation to do something is clearly there, right?
where's Israel come into play then?
I don't focus on that. I don't have enough information. I don't feel they have any relevance.
Okay.
There's
So-
mentions in the document dump, not leak. Go ahead. Question.
No.
But ultimately,
Release.
out of
I like
everybody,
dope.
everybody
I love
that
that.
JFK really,
Yeah.
I mean, pissed off or
Mhm.
It
crossed,
sounds like you pissed off a lot.
who do you
of people.
think out of everybody, CIA, the mob, all these people, who do you think was actually behind the assassination?
I think it was Alan Dulles,
And who was he part of?
former head of the CIA that he
Oh,
fired.
so it was CIA.
He was old
Who did he work
school. I mean, he was the guy I told you that was working with those law firms back then to protect the
appointed
corporate
him, is
interests.
what I'm saying.
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower.
No, sorry, Truman first, and he helped create the CIA.
So the
And
Democrat
the
assassinated
and
a
there's
Democrat.
people who've gone on the record that said when Allen Dulles was fired in 1962 after the Bay of Pigs invasion failed, he lived in a townhouse in Georgetown in Washington D.C. And that John McCone, who was never connected to the CIA, is who Kennedy appointed to run the CIA after he fired him, after he fired Dulles. Dulles was taking meetings with guys who were reporting him and telling them what was going on every day. It's like he was operating a whole separate CIA on his own. They were arguing. I think he had the most because the planning of this, we're kind of getting ahead of where I want to go, but the planning of this assassination could not have been done by someone unless it was at that level.
So if we're getting ahead, how about go back on track then?
Sure. Oh, where I was.
Yeah.
So if the mob has worked with the U.S. before
The Mafia.
and feels like they got screwed, Joe Kennedy allegedly screwed them because now they're being prosecuted and Bobby Kennedy's deporting people out of the country that are mafia figures. And they can't get their interests in Cuba protected. They're like, well, then this guy's got to go. Problem is, if you say that, well, how do you eliminate someone like this? There's too many people involved in a conspiracy, and you can't keep everybody's mouth shut. That's why so many people died after this or that were involved. Like, how did this guy suddenly die? This person suddenly died, or Underhill suddenly died. So there's a lot, but like the Mafia is known that if they're going to pull something off like this, they usually kill closely, right? Like Jack Ruby, who killed Oswald, he did it up close. That's how Mafia generally does it. To plan a strategic shooting at a distance like that in that area and knowing about motorcade routes and how many Secret Service men are going to be there, you needed somebody on the inside. That's why to answer your question, it had to be
So
people
Secret Service
involved.
was also involved.
I think the mob, I don't know. That's an argument that I can't prove. And I doubt that. I think that people were making calls to the Secret Service saying, oh, we don't need as many men. Like, there's a part, I write about this in my book because it's a true story.
I mean, it's pretty fucking wide open, bro. Where he got shot.
There was no talk. It was
Literally wide open.
Yeah, it's a perfect place to conduct that. And I don't know how they wouldn't have seen it. There's no snipers. There's windows open. Everything there that day. But people could say, well, we're going to pull back. I talk about it in my book where there's a part where the night before people were in bars in Dallas the night before assassination.
Much, though,
no,
right?
but there's Secret Service guys and they're getting hammered. And they got to work the next morning to protect the president.
Which means if they're hammered, they're giving out.
Seems like the same people that were protecting Trump.
There you go.
So if you're getting hammered at a bar, you lose all inhibition and you start saying shit.
Well, you're not as focused. You woke up hungover. Who knows?
Not that. Maybe you said something to someone at that bar.
If they knew anything,
listening.
which I don't think those guys did. And even if you said something, you wouldn't have enough time to make the proper adjustments by 9, 10 in the morning.
If you're professional.
But I don't think.
If you're CIA professional.
But I don't think that was the point. I don't think the Secret Service was in on it. But you could make an argument for sure. Especially you could. So over time.
Indirectly.
Indirectly.
Yeah.
Over time, these things build up. And so then you have all these questions again, which I don't think the documents show. Which is, well, how did they pull this off? They don't tell you. Who was involved?
The documents you reviewed so far.
The documents I reviewed so far, correct.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing so far, there's no smoking gun like that.
No,
But there's positives from the documents that we see. For instance, we haven't talked about him yet, Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, why is this guy relevant? Well, and I posted one on my Instagram the night that the documents came out.
He is a scapegoat.
Well, they're tracking him in 1950s going to Russia. He was going to Helsinki, Finland. I posted a document. They're tracking this guy. He was either working for them directly or they lied to him and say, look, you're going to work for us off books. And they're going to strategically put him in places where it looks like he'd be motivated to want to kill. And, oh, yeah, go buy this gun and do this and go to Russia and then defect and come back and go try to assassinate General Walker, which he allegedly tried to do, who's an old general who was running for, I think it was the presidency or governor in Dallas at the time, or the presidency as a Republican candidate, an old general. And apparently Oswald missed the shot and Walker survived. He was nicked by...
How was he not arrested in that incident?
Why wasn't he arrested when he came back from defecting to Russia and coming here and not questioned? He was allowed to freely move everywhere. And that's a great point.
Like Hunter Biden.
This guy was clearly meant to do one of two things. He was meant to be the shooter or he was meant to be the scapegoat for it.
He was a scapegoat.
I think he was too dumb to be able to pull this off and be a shooter. Plus, you can get into the details on this.
Didn't he say, I'm a scapegoat? No,
I'm a patsy.
I'm a patsy, yeah.
Which he was. He walked right out of the school book depository, took a bus and left and allegedly killed J.D. Tippit, which the cop that saw him walking, which I don't think that's true either. I think the J.D. Tippit killing was a backup for the CIA guys who planned this to say, look, if he gets out, if we can't pin the murder on him, we got to have something to pin on this guy to keep him confined in a
kill-
jail
kill
cell,
the cop.
and we'll get him killed then.
Yeah.
So we kill a cop to use. That's why I don't think he did. I think he didn't do anything. I think he was there that day, obviously.
Then why?
But I think they gave him a false cover to be there. Say, look, watch out for these Cubans. They might try to kill. Go there, gain intelligence, tell us what you see. And at the end of the day, they pinned it all on him. And they had this backstory they've developed over years to say that's our scapegoat guy.
And then he gets killed by Jack Ruby.
Correct. 2 days later, 3 days later, when they're moving him, they're moving him from the cell underneath the Dallas police.
And this guy
to
somehow
actually
was
get ready
in the
for trial.
correctional facility with a gun.
No, Jack Ruby, who was
I thought he had a gun and
he
shot
did.
him.
He worked for the mob.
Yeah.
He posed. I don't know how he got into that underground basement.
You know, how
I
he
have
got
a
in.
great part about how this happened in my book, by the way, because I
Which
tell
we
my
won't talk
story.
about.
I won't get into details.
Yeah.
You got to buy the book.
You
See
got to buy the
it.
book.
You see it.
Called
Across the Knoll. Right
Across
now,
the Knoll.
unless I change the title, but for now it's called Across the Knoll.
Yeah.
So,
So the mafia is 100% into this shit.
Well,
They're killing the patsy.
I don't know.
They already said, "Hey, the killer of JFK has been assassinated."
What, the mafia? You mean?
Yeah.
Well,
Oswald.
I think the mafia was in on it. I think the mafia
It's in the JFK
and guys with the
release.
deep state actors. Well, yeah. I think they worked together and they kind of spliced up duties. Like, what are you good at versus what are we good at? Like the CIA and deep state guys probably said, look, we're able to get the shooters in here that can really shoot well from distance.
And take them out.
We'll make sure that there's not a lot of CIA. We'll make sure guys aren't on the roof that can stop our shooters. We'll make sure that the motorcade slows down and that because the original motorcade route wasn't supposed to go down Elm Street, right next by the grassy
Really?
knoll. Supposed to go down Main Street, right in the center, further away, making the shots completely
Why
harder.
did they change it?
Why do you think they changed the motorcade?
Because CIA.
So
Mafia.
again, there's
Yeah.
things. Then Mafia says, okay, well, we'll clean it up, right?
Which they did.
If you have guys that need to be whacked that are going to talk, we'll take care of that, right? So
Which
it's
they
like
did.
because it's mutual interest here. Like they both have an interest to make this work. So there's an argument. I'm not saying this is 100% fact. There's an argument that this is kind of how this might have went down, and so it leads to all these theories. And my point is, you can release all the documents that you want. I still don't think you're going to get the exact answers you want. But we learn a lot. Like I think we've learned, and people have wondered over time, was Oswald a CIA operative? I think you can argue, yeah, they were controlling him because these documents show them reporting on him and letting him move freely and watching his movements. They clearly had to have him, to be able to do that, they had to have control of their working. He was working for them in some way. But again, it was probably just to make it look like he's probably never officially on their books, right?
I wouldn't call him an operative. I'd call him
Exactly.
more like he was a pawn.
That's exactly a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And then you'll see in these document releases where the Underhill memo was big, the Schlesinger memo was big, how they're showing you how they ran their
They
operations.
released another 12,000.
Exactly. All their agents that they had working and where they were stationed, what they were finding, what they were seeing. They were writing memos back and forth to the CIA.
Steve, all this information that you're
Yeah.
discussing now is the files that were released recently, correct?
Correct. By
Okay.
President Trump. This was around March 17th.
Okay.
Yep.
But also some that were released prior.
There's been documents that have been out before prior because
I think they released
But not
some in
this much
2012.
they were trying to release some
In
even under
2012,
Obama because
yeah.
there's a JFK Records Act that came from the 1992 House Select Committee on Assassinations from the 70s, and they did another one in 1992.
But those were heavily redacted.
Correct.
Yes.
You wouldn't get the information that you wanted. But they said that by 2029, everything had to be released. And Trump said, well, we can release everything sooner in 2016 when he was president. But then Mike Pompeo, who's head of the CIA at the time, and some other guy said, well, look, there's information in these things that could still implicate people who are alive or
Like
our
who?
methods
Like
or
who?
tactics. Well, we have to figure that out. That's my
Yeah,
point.
that's-
But like there were social security numbers of people that were leaked when you look at the documents. They didn't even scrub them properly. So people who are alive, I think still their social security numbers were out there. They've already been leaked. It was in the news actually recently. So, but he was saying there's information out there where we have to withhold them, but they were excuses to withhold the documents, obviously. But they were going to have to be released eventually. But I think RFK Jr., who's now head of Health and Human Services, I believe, I think him being aboard with Trump, he would obviously push Trump's arm to say, look, it's my family. I want to make sure, we
And he was a
get into it."
Democrat, by the way. Just
Yeah.
Pointing that out.
Yeah, correct.
Probably still is. I don't know.
Probably. He's just aligning his own interests.
Yeah.
So, but there's so much
Because
more.
his dad got killed. Bobby.
Yeah, a couple years after JFK, when
Yeah.
Bobby ran for president, he was assassinated by Sirhan, allegedly. But
Yeah.
those documents have to come out. And Sirhan's still alive. He's
The-
in jail
the-
right now.
the entire-
He's pleading for release.
The entire Kennedy family has such a deep history.
Why do they always
do.
want to get killed?
They don't want to yet.
No, okay. That's okay.
They
They
know too much
to kill them
Yeah, why do people always want to kill the Kennedy family?
because they
They
were
know too
doing
much.
things that were against the status quo.
Actually, they were doing things for the American people.
That's what they should be doing. That's what our JFK and RFK's argument were. We should be a different type of
So
society.
it always comes back to who is controlling these individuals and the bureaucracies, and
We'll
why
never
is
know.
everybody
We'll
so
never know.
afraid
We'll
when
never know.
DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is trying to
Your boy.
expose all the fraud and all the like
Waste and
USAID.
abuse. And
Bro, USAID, I know AID's in there, but that's not what it stands for. It's not for aid. It's for United States.
paramilitary operations.
No, yeah, sure, okay.
They're basically, I mean, I'm not saying it's true.
It's international interest that they're trying to form a globalist society throughout.
Well, they
planet
help the
Earth.
world by providing foreign aid to countries. And that's one of the
$50 million
vehicles
for condoms.
that the USA provides
Hamas.
aid to
Gaza
other
Strip.
countries. But you could argue that they were doing black ops out of it and running the money through that, so they didn't have to put it on the books for part of the black budget.
Isn't that the easiest way to launder money? Is under the guise of good faith.
I wouldn't know. I'm not a money launderer, but people say yes. That could be a way to do it. Yes, of course. Or you could have casinos in Cuba in the 1960s and run your drug money through that. And
Now, I will say the Bay
Yeah.
of Pigs is one of the best versions of nuclear war ever, because Russia literally was
They had
on the
weapons
blockade
there.
line,
Yeah.
and they had nuclear weapons off
They were ready-
the
they were
coast
ready
of
to
the
launch.
United States. Yeah.
yeah.
Now, with that being said, okay, I had a brain fart. I don't know.
It's okay. Were you having the fear about the weapons being so close to U.S. soil? Well, I don't know if you're making this
Oh, yeah.
correlation. The
To being
correlation
so
is-
close to Russia,
Exactly.
Yes.
Ukraine
Ukra-
saying Ukraine don't join NATO
Don't
because
jo-
then NATO can now put their
Well, now-
forces closer to the
so-
Russian border, and that affects our interest, and we feel
Yes.
insecure, and now we have to defend ourselves, which is
So-
the whole point of this
so-
alleged proxy war
exactly.
that he says.
There you
Exactly.
go.
I knew
There
you
you
were
go.
going there.
Because of the Balkans, okay?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
not only that, but Bill Clinton's the one that instigated it and started it.
George Bush, maybe Clinton. It was right around
It
1992.
was George Bush Senior.
Yeah, he
Clinton-
said
Clinton
we won't
also-
put weapons in Turkey. We won't.
But
They will
did.
make sure. And guess what? They
And then
reneged on
Clinton
that.
also did. Then Bush Jr. did,
Mhm.
and then Obama
mean
did,
Dick Cheney.
and then Joe Biden did.
And it's funny because if you
And
look,
you could see if
if you-
someone did that to us, which
Mhm.
they already did,
well, that's
we want to go to war.
It's a good correlating
And now all of a
argument.
sudden, you have what's going on in Russia, and everybody's saying Ukraine, 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 support, support, support. But we told Russia after they tore down the Berlin Wall, Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Hey, NATO will not move any further east.
Yeah.
Yet they continue to do it. Russia continued to tolerate it. And
That's Russia's
all of a
argument.
sudden,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, they're like, well, we got missiles on our borders, and you want us to be okay with it, with what happened. And let me get this straight. Russia is not USSR, okay? The Soviet Union.
Well, the argument
they are
is they're-
different.
The argument is they're trying to be.
They're not.
That's
though.
what they're saying. Though they're saying
They're
that,
saying, yo, you tried us 5 times
Yeah.
with 5 different presidents.
No, that's the great argument that's out right now.
Now, what the fuck, bro? What do you want us to do? Let you walk into our borders?
Yeah. No, it's
United
true.
States wouldn't let that happen.
No, you're not
and
wrong.
we did it.
And that's the argument that they're making. People are saying, well, he's using that, Putin is, as an argument to grab more land to create the USSR again, whether it's true or not.
That's
People are
not
just
true,
saying
bro.
that, yeah.
He's trying to
So these
protect his
arguments everywhere.
borders.
But it's great that you said this because if you think about it, if you don't already know this, I'll wrap this up real fast.
Shit.
I'll wrap this up real fast. Is the
I didn't see that.
the reason why the Cuban Missile Crisis stopped?
Actually, can we cover
Oh
that?
no, I'll tell you right now. It'll wrap it up. Is the U.S. agreed to remove the missiles out of Turkey, and that's what stopped it. Russia felt better to be able to do it, and then they took their missiles down from the U.S. So it almost makes you think if we did it now, what good would come out of it?
And that's why
That's
Trump
it.
Stopped funding Ukraine, because he's trying to.
Maybe that's what we're going. We don't
Zelensky
know.
doesn't want to,
But that's
because
the
he's
whole point
lining
about
his
these,
pockets,
you know,
bro.
these very complicated, strategic decisions to make on foreign relations.
Why can't we all get along?
Time,
Huh?
time.
At time. And thank you all for tuning into Happy Hour Holidays. We'll be right back with a JFK release and the book Across the Knoll. All right, welcome back to Happy Hour Holidays. Sean was going to ask a question to Mr. Fantetti over here about the JFK files.
What?
You just said you had a question.
But
for
No, I
us.
said I wanted to stay on the JFK file.
Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about.
I'll answer whatever you want.
Well, I mean,
That I know.
what my question was is as far as like the media and the way
I
they
mean, we
shaped-
talked about a lot of shit.
Well,
off
It's
this.
a
Yeah,
lot.
no,
and
we
we
did.
went through it fast.
Yeah.
Well,
This
I
is
mean,
like a 6-hour podcast.
I'm just
if you want to
thinking
get into
from-
that detail.
from
I tried
what the
to keep it-
media shaped the narrative to be on JFK's assassinations,
Mhm.
once the media released, or once the
Interesting.
government released the new files, how did the media shape the narrative now? Or what does it shape the narrative now to what it used to be?
No, that's a good question. I think we might have partially answered this, but we can go into detail.
We did, yeah.
Or if you don't want to, we can go into another
'cause
question.
it's a good question because the question's not answered yet. It's ongoing. So this is why I like what you asked. Is over time, when the assassination happened, we were given the Warren Commission report. Remember?
Yeah.
And we were told that we had to accept that as the official narrative for what happened with the assassination. That it was a single shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone wolf, fired 3 shots, which clearly, no, I mean, like, there's a shot you can look at where Connolly's not even hit yet, and JFK was already shot. And if that magic bullet hit him, it would have hit Connolly already. So we know there's more than one shooter, clearly.
Some people
From that
argue
point
that
alone.
it went through him, but
Correct, but my point is, by the time that shot went in, it should have already hit him.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
if Connolly's still looking back, not hurt yet, then why did the magic bullet not hit him yet? My point is, there's a whole bunch of flaws in it.
How many shooters
there's
do you
more.
think there were then?
I can't say because it's in my book, but you will see when you read my book.
Ah,
So with all
And
this,
I actually say where I think they were located.
so with all this,
Yeah.
the public trust
They
in
had-
the government, how much did
Well,
it
yeah,
lose?
because here's why, and I'm glad we're here. So the Warren Commission says that. Guess who was on the Warren Commission? The people who investigated, the panel. Alan Dulles was on it, the guy who started the CIA that hated Kennedy that they fired, who might have planned the whole thing, allegedly suppressed a whole bunch of important information
That sounds
and
convenient.
witnesses. Exactly. It's like what did Oliver Stone say in his movie? It's like the fox investigating the chicken coop when you're the ones that always go in and do everything. So Gerald Ford was on that one, on that committee.
Really?
And there's a whole
Former
bunch.
President Gerald Ford.
Exactly, yep.
Oh.
And so as a result of these things, and the public had to accept this narrative, back then it was hard to challenge it. You couldn't get access to information. No one had camera phones. People's cameras got confiscated the day they were there. And allegedly, a lot of their stuff was deleted or changed. Now, in 1970, around that time, Geraldo Rivera, remember Geraldo?
Yeah.
Had a show. He was the
He's
first.
still alive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was the first one
He
to
was on
ever.
Fox and then moved to.
He was the first one to ever
CNN.
show the Zapruder film to the public. And that's what started raising issues. They kept the Zapruder film under wraps. People know the U.S. government took it from Zapruder, allegedly altered it. Don't know for sure, but it still shows Kennedy getting shot. And looks like his head's going back to the left. Life magazine bought the rights for $150,000 from him
He was laying on it
on his side that way,
on the left.
going against his wife, going
on
that
the
way.
right.
So the shot came from the knoll. He went this way. So if we're going down Elm Street and the grassy knoll is this way where that plant is, the shot looks like it went this way because his head went the wound looks like it was right here in the right temple, and his head went back into the left. If it was from the depository, it's more likely a shot with that force
There you
would
go,
have forced him forward.
Yeah.
So why was his body going this way? And it looks like it happened here. Could you still hit him from the depository here? Probably, maybe, but it looks like it would have been a wound in the back. So we were forced to accept that narrative. Then information started coming out. Zapruder film came to the public, and now the media was saying, well, it looks like that there might have been a different way this went down, and we can't trust the Warren Commission report. But the government still stands by. You're taught in schools that it was Lee Harvey Oswald, and that report and the commission report's always still been put into play. People are now challenging it through the media because of Oliver Stone's movie JFK, which is a great movie. I haven't seen it. They'll bring a lot of this background to make sense. One of the best movies I've ever seen.
What?
Oh yeah, JFK.
JFK?
JFK. The movie JFK is centered on a man named.
Who's the actor in it?
So Kevin Costner plays Jim Garrison. Jim Garrison is the only person who ever brought a case in an actual court of law on the assassination of JFK.
Have you ever watched that movie?
Oh my God, you guys need to watch that movie.
Well,
It's
it came out in the
addicting.
90s, I'm assuming?
1991 it came out.
Was it a good movie?
It's amazing.
Oh shit.
It literally walks through
It's
everything
called
I've been telling
JFK.
you.
It's not called John F. Kennedy.
It's called JFK.
Oh shit! I need
Oliver
to watch
Stone
that.
directed it, so you know it's legit. He's a great director.
Yeah, he is.
And Kevin Costner plays Jim Garrison. He was a Jim Garrison was Louisiana prosecutor, and allegedly, well, actually it's been proven.
So not allegedly.
Oswald was one. Several other guys were involved in Louisiana in the plot to work for the CIA and do things that had to do with
the state
going
Louisiana?
against Cuba in the state of Louisiana in New Orleans.
But
so
not
Jim Garrison
the
was a
state of
prosecutor in New
Louisiana.
Orleans.
No, okay.
In the city of New Orleans, there were areas where people were doing activities that were related to helping the CIA go against Castro, anti-Castro Cuban work. Oswald was there, and he was doing things that make it look like he was against Cuba. Then he took events. He has these stamped pages that said the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and he said he was pro-Cuba at the time. He was taking all these contrary positions, probably because the CIA was telling him to do these things and create a bunch of stir. So Jim Garrison, after Kennedy's assassinated, he sees the Zapruder film and subpoenas it and gets it and shows it in a court. And he claims that this guy named Clay Shaw, who actually was a CIA operative, he couldn't prove it at the time, was in a conspiracy to kill JFK on behalf of all these other deep state actors. And he ended up losing that case, but it was the only case ever brought in the assassination of JFK. But it brought all these things to light that showed the weaknesses of the Warren Commission. And it was that case that people started saying the Warren Commission's likely BS. There was probably more than one shooter. The Zapruder film was finally being able to be shown. It brought a bunch of evidence to light. Then it started the JFK Records Act under Clinton in 1992, right after Bush was leaving, the first Bush, where now they said, look, these documents have to come out by 2029. All this stuff came from Oliver Stone's movie, and it started raising the narrative that there was probably more than one shooter in a conspiracy.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, how does the JFK assassination compare to other political
Great
assassinations
question.
in terms of the public eye?
So,
Like maybe the MLK assassination, which those files are supposed to be released as well.
yeah. So those are all, and same with Bobby Kennedy, could be considered the same type of assassination. Now, are you asking me how does it compare to other I mean, there's been presidential or public figures.
I would say public figure assassination.
Controversial.
Here's what I would tell. Yeah, I would.
Most famous and controversial
Yes.
assassination is JFK.
I would say yes, if that's kind of what you're asking. I would say.
Is that what you?
Yeah,
asked?
I was going to
I would say for several reasons.
Yeah.
One is a lot of assassinations, even the ones that weren't successful, like Reagan when John Hinckley shot him.
Donald Trump.
And we know Sirhan. We know the guy.
Well, the one in South Korea, that guy got killed.
My point is, a lot of times, a lot of people see the guy do it. They walk up close and do it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So you know who the killer was.
Yeah.
In this case,
Nobody knows, right?
we don't really have the 100% videoed proof of who did it. A lot of assassinations, you've seen them on tape. John Hinckley, the guy was right there. Sirhan was at the hotel in California.
Someone tried to assassinate George Bush Jr. with a shoe.
Yeah, correct.
Do you remember that?
He ducked it pretty quick.
He dodged that like
like
a G.
fool me once,
But that's it.
fool me again.
It's the intrigue, and because it's a president of the United States that died, and this is what makes it so relevant and why I even wanted to write about it, is you could argue that it changed the tide of America's future at that time.
Well,
You could argue we were going to get away from American imperialistic interests. The secrecy was going to start coming down. We weren't going to be doing these covert operations that led to more wars and created more strife in the world to make people hate America, is the argument, not mine. But it motivated me to say, America lost a lot of innocence from this because it showed that not only anybody could be killed, history's going to teach us, that if our own government or people connected to it could pull this off, that nobody's safe. And that brought a lot of worry. And to me, that's what caused a lot of these issues to where that assassination matters and why it's so intriguing today. So if that's the case, that's why, to answer your question, is probably the most paramount one and the most popular one, and why these document releases matters, because we're still trying to figure it out. And I don't think we're going to find the actual answer to these. I don't think we ever will. There's been 60 years these documents been hiding in archives controlled by mostly the CIA before they're released to the National Archives.
Which means who knows what kind of
what they got rid of,
destroyed,
what they're actually giving you, what's selective, what was destroyed. So
what do you actually think happened? Because you've been talking about the history and the but you haven't actually provided a definitive opinion of what you think happened. Yeah. What do you think happened?
Because it won't be based on fact. It's my estimation.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good.
It's an op-ed.
Because that's a big difference. I'm not gonna say this is what happened.
Wait, but does Steve want to tell us, or do you want to read the book?
This is not my book's narrative.
Okay.
If I had to just stay here today and have a beer or cigar with somebody and saying, Steve, how do you think it went down? I would tell you a lot of what I just said.
After reading what you also read,
I would say that a lot of what I said in the beginning to set it up about the Mafia being upset but not being able to kill them on their own because they don't know how to carry that out. The CIA paramilitary interest being upset at Kennedy. I think they worked together in the way that I said. And I think that they said, look, we're going to set up because we have control over the government actors. Is what the kind of, CIA or
Mafia
rogue. What Underhill said, there's a rogue group in the CIA that really did this. They partnered with the Mafia and they said, this is the part that we're going to do. this is the part that you're going to do, and we're going to get this done. I think they had multiple shooters there that day, and I think they were in many
When you
strategic
say
positions.
multiple, how many?
More than 2.
More than 2.
Affiliated
Definitely.
with the same group?
Oh, yeah. I don't think the shooters knew each other, but I think they were all in the
No, they
locations they were
probably
supposed to be in.
conspired.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Well,
They
maybe.
conspired.
Well, conspiracy is only 2 or more people. Only needs 2 people.
Yeah.
But they were part of a larger conspiracy. But I think that they were in different buildings. I definitely think there was someone on the grassy knoll. There was a man named Lee Bowers who was in the train tower behind the school book depository because there was a huge train yard
Who the fuck is
past
that?
the overpass. Well, he was killed a couple of years after the JFK assassination. Number one, the Warren Commission never took his testimony in full and put it in the Warren Commission
Why?
report. Well, he said, and he was there when the assassination happened, he said within 20 to 30 minutes before the assassination, there were cars going behind the grassy knoll and parking and leaving. And he said, men were there. There was a whole bunch of cigarette butts just laying there like they
Did he
were
mention
waiting
black
there.
suits or anything like that?
They were dressed like normal people. He said there was someone who looked like they were dressed like a cop. I think that day there were people who were dressed like cops and had fake Secret Service credentials and were showing them who actually did some of the stuff to get out of there. And I think that he saw that, and it was an indication. He said it in his testimony that there was something out of the ordinary occurring on the embankment that day, but I don't know what it was. Because there's never people huddled in that area. Everybody would have wanted to be at the front of the street watching JFK come by. Why do you want to huddle behind low visibility? So,
well, to take a shot.
he clearly believed that there was somebody that was going to be there. He ended up dying in a car accident a couple years later.
Kind of like Princess
when
Diana.
they were starting to open up the investigation, like Jim Garrison was doing, and all these witnesses he wanted, they were all dead.
Now, let me
He
ask
started subpoenaing people, and they were all gone.
Let me ask you a question. Do you fear talking on air about this assassination?
Do I?
Yeah.
No, I'm nobody important. I'm just giving information and my own views, and I'm talking about information that's already been disclosed.
Do you think maybe the CIA?
My book is made up. What? No, there's a lot of people who talk about this stuff more than I do. I just find it to be an interesting topic. I'm writing a book about it. It's my book's a historical fiction
And
book.
are you gonna drink? The
I'm
rest
taking
of that,
historical
or should I
facts.
take it?
I'm gonna transition right now.
Okay.
It's a really good drink you made. By the way.
I still think that,
Oh, it's a transfusion.
you know,
amazing.
after seeing the, you know,
You guys didn't need to watch JFK though.
obviously I didn't see
I'm
that
going
many.
to.
I didn't see that many assassinations
to.
in my life as far as like presidential candidates.
Well, bro,
But I would say
The-
that I keep seeing that the Secret Service is the mole.
no, okay.
mole.
So, but
The
you're
mole?
saying assassinations.
Who
Ray-
else? Who else is going to
Reagan-
know where that
was
person
there
is?
was a there was
Who
an
do they answer
assassin.
to?
There was
Huh?
an assassination
The
test.
CIA.
You know what? Hey CIA,
It's
I
not
love
who
you
they answer
guys. I love you guys.
I like the CIA too. It has a purpose, and I think it's done more good than people realize. Because their successes are really not known.
But it
Their
also
failures
has done
get
a lot of
exposed, right?
shady shit, though.
Well, sometimes you have to do some stuff, to make some things happen. But again, you get into that big dilemma? Is it morally or ethically right? Was it in the favor of America's interest, or was it in the interest of other individuals or groups that aren't America, and they're using our tax-paying dollars, or people we voted in to do these things, and these other off-book rogue groups are doing things? That's not a good, free, open society, is the argument, right? So that's why
And then
it
the
has
question,
to be run in
the
a
question
proper way.
is, who is the one making those decisions for these
Back then,
bureaucracies?
or right now?
Right now, back then,
The
Well, obviously
Illuminati.
you have there.
Oh,
Throw it up.
Illuminati.
I mean,
Beyonce, what are you
There's
doing?
a director of national intelligence. That's Tulsi Gabbard. I'm sure they have oversight. There's a Senate select
Don't
committee
be
on
so
intelligence.
naive. Don't be so naive to think that
No.
just because there is a director of the CIA
I'm not
that is
naive. You
appointed,
just
that there
screwed
is
that
not
assumption.
well,
I'm not of that assumption.
I defer.
I think it's. I don't know what that means. All I know is I just think that there's got to be a point where I'm sure
Somebody's controlling
it
this shit.
stops. Well, there's probably people pulling the strings on a lot of different things in many different places.
Just
But
to sidetrack real quick,
yeah,
the Donald Trump assassination.
what about it?
Why don't we know anything about the guys that did it?
How did it
Well,
get?
there's
how
one
did-
guy allegedly.
but
No,
allegedly.
two.
But how did
Two
it,
shooters they found. They
No.
found just the
One
They shot
guy
and
in
killed the guy?
Pennsylvania, another guy in
The guy in
Mar-a-Lago.
Pennsylvania killed the insurance guy. I
No,
That insurance.
but for being
Yeah, the shooter
for
guy who
being-
shot the insurance guy.
for
in
being
New
an
York.
assassination
No,
on a
that's
presidential.
I know. I was trying to,
Yeah.
Well,
trying to get your boy
no,
going.
but for
Yeah,
a,
he didn't get that.
well,
Yeah.
whatever. I don't give a shit. The
Keep going.
assassination
Yeah.
for being on a ex-president to now a future president. The media coverage was this little.
For Trump,
Yeah.
well, he didn't die.
Yeah.
Number one.
Doesn't
Number
make for
two,
great press.
When's the last time a presidential
Candidate was
assassination?
Kennedy.
That
attempted.
that didn't work or
No,
attempted.
attempted.
Several.
Reagan.
There was one on Ford. There was one on
All right,
Reagan.
so we're talking about back then. We're not talking about
back
recently.
then- no, Reagan was in the 80s.
Yeah, the
bro.
80s. I'm talking about
Ford
90s,
was in the
2000s,
70s.
2010s.
So
And
it
now we're in
happened
the
like
2020s.
once a
Oh,
That's
it's
40
decade.
years.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
assassination attempts since then. Some guy shot up the White House in 1993 when Clinton was in there.
Here's
Literally
the-
had a machine gun shooting bullets at the White House.
Here's the thing.
No success
The
in
the
killing him,
Secret
but
Service
there's
has
been
gotten.
attempts
But this
on
one-
life.
but
The
this one
Secret
wasn't as-
Service has gotten better at stifling
Of course.
assassination attempts.
If
Well, I
you
thought-
look
telling.
now the real question is, why weren't they so good to
Well-
stifle this?
Because they're in
it's
on
an
it.
argument. Now there's
They're in
there's
on it.
several arguments.
Yeah, exactly.
Kamala and Joe Biden.
Because in 1963, there was Adlai
Bumbling Joe Biden. And
Adlai
Kamala
Stevenson
Harris.
was, I believe, the Secretary of State or Defense under Kennedy. Secretary of State, I think. He went to Dallas, and he was, I think, spit on and assaulted when he was there. This is a couple months before Kennedy
That's not
went
an
there.
assassination attempt.
I didn't say assassination. I said assaulted.
Yeah.
Like,
Now,
assaulted and
My
spit
point
on.
is, they were showing at that time there was a memo that was written that said, "We believe," the military said, "we believe that it's too dangerous to be in Dallas at this time." Or I think the Secret Service even
yes,
said
I
it.
remember this.
And they
Yep.
said, "You probably shouldn't go."
And he said, "I don't care."
Don't care, I'm going anyway.
Yep.
Because it was important for the trip. Kennedy wanted to,
And
he
you know,
had to win, to win
Trump-
the South.
Trump also said
He
that.
brought LBJ
Yep.
down with him, which is a whole other can of worms. of what he was in on it or
LBJ
not.
was in cahoots with the CIA.
most
bro.
likely.
Not most likely. It's in those files.
Is
You need
it?
to read more than those 6,000 pages, bro, or 12,000.
Well, of course, that's all I've been able to read so far. But I would tell you this:
I mean, there's
a document doesn't say that
92,000.
he was in on it.
yes, bro.
You're inferring. You're telling me you found a
No, I
document.
am not inferring.
So there's a document in those docs
Yes.
that LBJ admits that he, or it's
No.
stated that he was the one who was involved in the
No,
assassination.
No,
Oh.
he doesn't directly admit.
Oh, so what do you have then?
Indirectly admits.
Everything's indirect in those docs.
Right.
But
Allegedly.
anyway, allegedly. Anyway, he had that notice. But my point is, at the time, there was a lot of, opportunity for him to lose the election if he didn't win the South.
Bro-
Because remember, the Civil Rights Act was in the midst of trying to be passed in Congress. LBJ got the credit for it, but Kennedy really started it. And so the South didn't like that. They didn't want civil equal rights, right, for African Americans at the time. And so that caused strife in the South, and I think that was why you had to bring LBJ down. He was not going to be on the ticket. LBJ was under criminal indictments. People don't know this at the time. Bobby Kennedy wanted him to go to jail. They wanted him off the ticket. But they also needed him to win Texas. So there's a lot of background, which we can't get into all of it, about this case.
And what
It's
LBJ
wild to read it all.
Man, you almost like seem to praise LBJ.
No, I didn't say that. What did I say? Where's the praise come in? I say he's under indictments.
No. Prior to all that,
I think he was
stuff.
in on it. Well, it's a lot of good that LBJ did.
No,
but
he
there's
didn't.
a lot of
He
bad
didn't
that
do
he
anything
did.
good.
Well, and you could allowed to have that argument. I think he did a lot to try to
Enslaved.
see America go forward and fight through, because he was technically
See America.
he was a
go
Democrat.
forward.
There was democratic ideals he
JFK
upheld.
was a Democrat.
Right, but I think JFK and LBJ would both be Republicans today, but maybe a little bit
I
more.
wouldn't say LBJ.
probably
would be a
more
Republican.
progressive JFK is.
JFK would be probably.
Well,
a
it's hard the way the
Republican.
party's on. I think the party's too left for JFK today. That's why I think.
No,
him
I don't
and-
think so.
Oh, I do.
I think JFK would be a
It
Republican.
was arguable that
today.
he was a progressive Democrat.
He wanted transparency.
He
He
did.
wanted limited government. What did LBJ want? He wanted
War
to
in
run
Vietnam.
the war machine,
He did.
and he wanted to line the pockets of defense contractors.
I think that's probably true. I agree
Not
with
probably
that.
true. That's exactly what he did and what he wanted.
Mhm.
He's the one who went into Vietnam, bro.
He did not go there on his own. The military went in. But
oh, okay.
but
now you're being ambiguous.
That's not ambiguous. Ambiguous means it's unclear. It's very
it's-
clear that
oh,
the U.S.
well,
military
so then
went
what
in.
is clear? No.
It's clear that he was
Yeah.
president, and that I'm sure he did
Commander
align.
in chief.
I'm sure he aligned with defense
Commander in chief. He went in.
contractors.
He went in. If
Yeah,
I
not
tell you to
fight
walk,
the war, it's a big difference.
well,
It doesn't matter. We're getting off topic.
Jesus fucking
So-
Christ, Steve.
Don't say that. So, long story short is, I think that there was a lot of influence there that he should have known not to probably go. But the media today is going to see it as, we'll never truly really know the answer, but we're going to investigate it. You know what I mean? They're never going to ultimately.
I mean,
know the
we don't
truth.
even know.
Just
Steve, when does your book come out?
hoping fall of this year
All this year.
or sooner.
Cool.
Published by Penguin.
I don't know.
It will be.
I would love that.
Pendant?
Penguin.
Oh, Penguin?
Penguin big publishing.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah. I love them a lot.
Large,
They're great.
Large.
Yeah.
Well, as always, Steve, man, we really appreciate
I
it.
appreciate you
all
having
all
me.
the information you bring on. You're a man of many trades, book writer, sports agent, attorney,
Yeah.
corporate attorney.
Yeah.
And
cigar
Don't give me. I don't want.
aficionado.
I don't want his. I don't,
No,
I don't want him to
now
put a
he's the resume.
And
He's
Yeah,
the
but 10
resume.
million. No.
and newly added to the Dirty Martini Blue Cheese Stuffed
Love
Olives.
you guys got me addicted. We got to go back there. Del Frisco's best martini.
No, it wasn't Del Frisco's.
Best
it was,
dirty martini.
It was
Tampa.
in downtown Tampa.
You want to go to the Dan?
Is that what it was?
The Dan, to see the Dan.
Just plug the Dan for free. No free shout outs, man.
Yeah, no. The Dan was cool.
Dan was great.
Yeomans. Let's shout out Yeomans.
Yeomans, we had a good time there.
Pool,
Shout out.
golf simulator.
I beat you guys in the strongest punch, but that game that was great. yo. You
I
guys-
was in second place.
You guys need to hit the waiver.
The biggest guy was in third.
The big guy. Oh, yeah, tendinitis.
He hurt himself, remember?
There's one place that doesn't have
What?
tendonitis. Welcome to America.
Edit that out in post, please.
No, that's showing up.
All right, guys. Well,
Thanks, gentlemen.
appreciate everybody coming on, and Merry Christmas.